So guys, for the past 3 days, I've been doing a lot of stringing tests. At first, my stringing looked like this, and now I got it down to almost no stringing. I also noticed that when you're printing features closer together, the stringing is more prominent. And the reason is there's less distance to travel, so any sort of string that starts to build up can easily connect to the next island. If the point in your print that you're jumping from to the next point has a larger space, then there's more time in between that travel time for the string to snap and not fully bridge over. So I'll be using those settings in this video, not actually to show you guys stringing because that will be a later video, and I want to share with you my process because that's the most important thing, not what my settings are because it could be very different for your printer. As we've seen, the quality of Adventure 4s vary based on when you bought it or who you bought it from. So stay tuned for that video and be sure to subscribe. But today what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be testing this fan design that I did. As you can see, it's a dual duct where the nozzles will fire from both left and right side. We're going to be testing it against the stock fan, which I have a second one of because if you can see closely, these hinges broke off within like the first 2 prints that I did, so they sent me another one for free. The test print that we're going to be doing today is by a popular YouTuber. His channel name is Teaching Tech. This print shows the bridging capabilities, overhang capabilities, as well as very fine point capabilities of a printer. And the cooling is the most important thing for these 3 features. When you're trying to do a bridge, you want the filament to cool as quick as possible when you're stringing that filament from one edge to another. If you allow the filament to stay warm, the filament will just sag and you'll get a very terrible bridge. But if you cool it as quick as possible, you'll get a nice crisp line and it will almost look like you printed on supports. Overhangs are also another thing that cooling is very useful for. It's because the layer of filament that you're printing on top of the previous one, you're only overlapping by a certain percentage. And as your overhang gets steeper, you're going to have less and less overlap, to the point that you can only maybe have 10% of the next layer overlapping the previous. So you want to be able to cool that as quick as possible so that the filament that's not actually contact with the previous layer won't droop down. For the very fine tip point, it's very important to have a lot of cooling because the nozzle is essentially staying on top of the part at the same spot and will begin to transfer heat to the layers below. And that could cause the entire part to deform. So if you don't have enough cooling, then you're going to see very poor part quality. So with that said, let's load up these 2 fans and begin printing. I would really appreciate it if you leave a like down below if you're enjoying this video so far. So we have the 2 prints right here. One made with a standard shroud, and this is with my dual shroud. Also, I haven't printed with the FlashForge red PLA that came with the printer, and it looks like my stringing still needs a little bit of work. So I'm working on a solution for that. So yeah, the stringing video will be pushed out a little bit more. The settings were decent, no like major strings, just a lot of fluff if you can see. But starting off, let's look at the standard shroud print. Looking at the bridging, if I look across, the bridging looks pretty crisp. There's a little bit, like a tiny slouch in the filament that dips down, but not a huge deal at all. If I were to grade this bridging, I would probably give it an 80 to 90%. Looking at the overhangs, everything up to about 70 degrees was perfect. 80 degrees was a little bit more challenging where you can actually see the layer lines, a little bit of sag there. If I were to print anything over 70 degrees though, I would consider using supports. Now looking at the fine tip feature in the middle, I would say you have very good printing resolution with this nozzle and fan shroud combination. The conical shape doesn't have any sort of distortions in it, where the nozzle stayed on the filament for too long, transferred heat to layers below it, and caused it to deform. So the fan shroud definitely helped keep the filament cool, at least in the layers below the one that's printing. Now going over to my design with a dual fan duct. Now looking at the bridging, I would say it looks pretty much exactly the same as the other print with a standard fan. Looking at the overhangs though, the story is a little bit different. I would say, especially on the sides right here, so the fan shroud was blowing across this way. So the front and the back overhangs, they look decent, but the ones on the sides, they didn't do as well as a standard fan shroud. So it looks like my design with the dual duct so far is not doing as well against the Flashboard standard single duct. Looking at the conical shape, I would say right at the tip, everything looks amazing there. And looking further down, it looks okay, passable, kind of similar to the standard fan shroud one actually. I wouldn't say the conical shape is ever perfect below the top portion of this overhang, because once we get past this overhang, we can see that it prints just consecutively layer after layer for the tip of the spike. One thing I did notice is that on my fan design, there's less stringing compared to the standard fan design. And this might just be the fact that the standard fan actually cools a little bit better, so there's a lot more airflow. And what I noticed before is that more airflow actually caused more stringing. So in the end, if you care about overhangs, bridging, as well as small feature design, then I would definitely stick with a standard flash forged nozzle. When I'm critiquing my own fan shroud design, I actually noticed some flaws in there. There's a lot of up and downs in the path from the air going from one side to the other side. So that causes a lot of impedance, and therefore you lose a lot of pressure on the far side of the fan. And because half the airflow is going over to the other side on the right side of the extruder, then you have a weak flow of air on the right side and the left side is only at half power. So technically you actually do get more cooling power if you stick with the standard design. I do have another design in the works that I think could possibly work better, so stay tuned and subscribe if you're interested in seeing that. If this design doesn't work, then I have another theory as to why, and we'll explain that in that later video. And I think that if this doesn't work, I'm going to try to hack the printer and have dual fans. One more thing is that if you're actually going to attempt to print out this print over here, one thing you have to be careful of is that your printer might travel over that spike. And when that happens, sometimes I found that the printer nozzle actually caught on that spike and broke it off. So that's one of the downsides with this print that I found. And the only way to really get rid of that is through Z-hopping. Also, the problem with these overhangs over here is that they're very fragile. As the nozzle comes over here and prints on this side, it's actually pushing filament down. And you'll actually see the part flex, and sometimes they'll snap right at the base over here. I hope you guys enjoyed this discovery video, and I do actually have a link to the STL files if you're interested in trying to print this out yourself. I'll also leave the CAD files which I made in Fusion 360, so if you want to try, you can modify that design. Check out the description down below, it's on Thingiverse. I've got a couple videos up on the screen for you guys if you're interested in those. If you're there, I'll see you there. If not, that's a wrap.